The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of the crystal spires that pulsed with the lifeblood of Zarathus. The elders stood in a semicircle, their translucent robes shimmering faintly under the dim violet glow. Their faces, ancient, weathered by millennia of wisdom, were taut with something rare for their kind. Fear. High Elder Corrin's voice trembled as he spoke, each word a heavy stone dropped into the stillness. We warned them. We warned the Council, the fleets, the entire galactic assembly. Humans are not like the others. They are relentless, unstoppable. And now it is too late. No one answered. The younger initiates, standing at the edges of the chamber, shifted uneasily. They'd grown up on tales of the Elders' foresight, their ability to see the threads of fate weaving through the stars. But this was different. The humans were a fledgling species, barely a speck on the galactic map. How could they unravel everything the Zarathian Dominion had built over eons? The initiates exchanged glances, their glowing eyes flickering with doubt. They hadn't seen what the elders had seen. They hadn't felt the shiver in the void when the first human ships broke free of their cradle world. Corrin's gaze drifted to the holosphere at the center of the chamber. With a wave of his skeletal hand, it flared to life, projecting a scene that made even the boldest among them recoil. A human vessel, small, crude, patched together with materials the galaxy had long since abandoned, drifted through the wreckage of a Dominion warship. The warship had been a marvel of engineering, its hull forged from star steel, its weapons capable of cracking moons. Now it was a husk, torn open like a beast felled by a hunter's blade. And there, among the debris, the human ship lingered, its crew scavenging, undeterred by the destruction they'd wrought. They do not tire, Corrin said, his voice barely above a whisper. They do not yield. We struck their colonies, burned their skies, shattered their fleets, and still they came. More ships, more warriors, more defiance. He paused, his breath catching as the holosphere shifted to show a human soldier, bloodied, armor cracked, standing atop a mound of fallen Zarathian drones. The soldier raised a fist, shouting something the elders couldn't hear, but the gesture alone sent a chill through the room. It was triumph. Raw, unbridled triumph. Elder Vera stepped forward, her voice sharp with frustration. We told the Council to leave them be. We begged them to quarantine that wretched system, to let the humans claw at their dirt and die out in obscurity. But no, they wanted resources. They wanted slaves. They thought a primitive species could be broken. She laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the spires. And now the Council's fleets are ash, their worlds are burning, and the humans are at our gates. The initiates murmured among themselves, their doubt giving way to unease. They'd heard the rumors, whispers of human resilience, of battles where the odds should have crushed them but didn't. There was the tale of Tarvox Prime, where a single human outpost held off a siege for 3 cycles, long after their supplies ran dry. Or the massacre at Kelrin's Belt, where a human captain rammed his dying ship into a Dominion dreadnought, taking both to oblivion in a blaze of fire and spite. The stories were dismissed as exaggerations, propaganda from a desperate foe. But the holosphere didn't lie. The elders didn't lie. Corrin turned to the initiates, his eyes burning with an intensity that silenced their whispers. You think this is a war of weapons, of strategy? Number this is a war of will. The humans have something we lost long ago, something we buried beneath our towers and our laws. They hunger, not for power, not for glory, but for survival, and that hunger makes them unbreakable. One of the initiates, a young female named Silith, stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady, cutting through the tension. If they're so unstoppable, Why do we still fight? Why not negotiate, offer peace? The question hung in the air, naive yet piercing. The elders exchanged glances, their silence heavier than before. Vera answered, her tone laced with regret. Because they don't trust us. We struck first. We glassed their cities, slaughtered their young, all in the name of dominance. They see us as monsters now. And they're right to. Peace was never an option after what we did. The holosphere flickered again, this time showing a human fleet. Hundreds of ships, mismatched and scarred, emerging from the void. They moved with no discernible formation, no elegance, just a chaotic swarm bearing down on Zarathus's outer defenses. Alarms blared in the distance, faint but growing louder. The initiates froze, their glowing eyes wide with realization. The humans weren't coming. They were already here. Corin closed his eyes, his voice a broken murmur. We warned them. No one listened. And now, we pay the price. The alarms grew louder, a shrieking chorus that reverberated through the crystal spires of Zarathus. The chamber trembled, dust sifting from the ceiling as the first distant booms echoed beyond the walls. The initiates stumbled, clutching at one another, their glowing eyes darting toward the elders for reassurance that never came. Corin stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the holosphere as it tracked the human fleet's advance. The swarm of ships moved like a living thing, erratic, unpredictable, splitting apart and reforming with a ferocity that defied reason. Dominion interceptors raced to meet them, sleek and precise, but they were swallowed one by one, devoured by the humans' relentless tide. Vera's hands clenched into fists, her voice cutting through the chaos. They fight like animals, wild, desperate, with no regard for their own lives. How do you stop a foe that welcomes death? She turned to Corin, her frustration boiling over. We should have fled, High Elder. We should have abandoned this system when we had the chance. Pride has doomed us. Corin's response was slow, deliberate, as if each word cost him something vital. Flee where, Vera? To the outer rims? To the dead zones? They'd follow? They always follow. You've seen their kind. Wounded, starving, pushed to the edge of extinction. And still they rise. No corner of the galaxy is safe from them now. The holosphere shifted, zooming in on a single human ship at the forefront of the swarm. It was larger than the others, its hull a patchwork of salvaged metal and Dominion wreckage, bristling with makeshift weapons. A name was scrawled across its side in jagged crimson letters. Unbroken. The sight sent a ripple of dread through the chamber. That ship had become a legend among the Zarathians, whispered about in the aftermath of every lost battle. It was said to carry a crew of survivors from Earth's first colonies, the ones the Dominion had raised in their opening salvo. Survivors who'd sworn vengeance, who'd rebuilt their shattered lives into a weapon aimed at Zarathus's heart. Silith, the young initiate who'd dared to speak earlier, stepped closer to the holosphere, her voice trembling but defiant. If they're so driven by revenge, why not use it against them? Draw them into a trap. Let their anger blind them. We're smarter than they are. Surely we can outthink them. Vera snorted, a harsh sound that carried no humor. Smarter? Perhaps once. But they've learned, Silith. Every defeat we've handed them, every trap we've set, they adapt. They turn our own tactics against us. At Krenva's Reach, we lured them into an asteroid field, primed it with fusion mines. They lost half their fleet, and then they used the debris as cover to board our ships. By the end, our own commanders were begging for mercy. The memory hung heavy in the air. Krenva's Reach had been a turning point, a humiliation that shattered the Dominion's illusion of invincibility. The humans hadn't just survived. They'd thrived in the chaos, their soldiers fighting hand to hand in the corridors of Zarathian vessels, their screams echoing through comms until the lines went silent. The elders had watched the recordings in stunned disbelief. Humans with broken limbs still swinging, humans bleeding out but refusing to fall, humans who laughed as they died, dragging their enemies with them. A sudden jolt rocked the chamber, the spires swaying as a deep, guttural roar tore through the sky. The holosphere flickered, then stabilized, revealing a new image. A human drop pod crashing through Zarathus's outer shield, its hull glowing red from atmospheric entry. It struck the surface with a plume of fire and dust, and within moments, figures emerged, armored, relentless, moving with purpose toward the capital. The initiates gasped, some collapsing to their knees. The humans weren't just at the gates anymore. They were inside. Corin's voice broke the stunned silence, low and resigned. They don't need fleets to win. They don't need numbers. One human, given a chance, can undo us all. We thought them weak because they bleed, because they die. But it's their mortality that fuels them. They know their time is short, so they burn brighter than we ever could. Vera whirled on him, her eyes blazing. Then what do we do, Corin? Stand here and wait for the end? Preach philosophy while they carve us apart? Her words were a challenge, but beneath them lay a plea, a desperate hope that the High Elder had some answer, some miracle to pull from the ashes. Before Corin could respond, the chamber doors burst open and a breathless soldier stumbled in, his armor cracked and smeared with violet blood. High Elder, they've breached the lower districts. They're moving fast, cutting through our lines like nothing I've ever seen. They're chanting something, for Earth, for the fallen. It's driving them mad, unstoppable. The soldier's words dissolved into a sob, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Initiates screamed, elders shouted orders, and the holosphere flared with static as more drop pods rained from the sky. Silith stood frozen, staring at the soldier, then at the elders, her naive hope crumbling. The humans weren't just a threat. They were a force of nature, a reckoning born from the Dominion's own arrogance. Corin raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice was steady now, carrying a weight that stilled even the soldiers trembling. Gather the council, arm the reserves. We fight, not because we can win, but because we must. They'll take Zarathus, but they'll pay for every step in blood. As the chamber emptied, the holosphere lingered on the unbroken, its crimson name a scar against the stars. The humans were here, and they weren't stopping. Not now. Not ever. The streets of Zarathus burned, smoke coiled upward in thick, choking tendrils, staining the violet sky with streaks of black. The capital's spires, once symbols of eternal dominion, loomed like broken sentinels over a city unraveling at its seams. The humans moved through the lower districts with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Small bands of soldiers, ragged and bloodied, cutting through Zarathian defenses like a blade through silk. Their weapons were crude, their armor patched together from scavenged parts, but their eyes blazed with something the Zarathians had never understood. Purpose. In the war room beneath the high spire, Corin stood over a tactical grid, its flickering lights painting his gaunt face in shades of red and blue. The council had assembled, 7 elders, their robes tattered, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of desperation. The grid showed the humans advancing block by block, their chaotic movements somehow outpacing every countermeasure the Dominion threw at them. Drones fell from the sky in droves, shredded by human explosives. Ground troops vanished under waves of gunfire and steel, and still, the invaders pressed forward, their numbers seemingly endless despite the bodies piling in their wake. Vera paced behind Corin, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. We've lost the southern quadrant. The shield generators are offline. They blew them apart with their own ships, ramming them like beasts. Who does that? Who sacrifices their own just to wound us? Her voice cracked, the weight of their failure pressing down on her. She'd spent centuries honing strategies, commanding fleets, believing the Dominion's intellect could crush any foe. Now she watched it all crumble against an enemy that didn't care about logic or loss. Corin didn't look up from the grid. His fingers traced a line where a human unit had broken through the eastern barricade, their path marked by flickering red dots. Fallen Zarathian soldiers. They do it because they have nothing left to lose, he said quietly. We took their homes, their kin, their future. What's a ship or a life when all you have is vengeance? A young counselor, Terran, slammed his fist against the table, his glowing eyes wild with panic. Then why didn't we finish them? When we had the chance, why didn't we burn their world to cinders and be done with it? This half measure, it's why they're here now. His words were a snarl, but beneath them lay a tremor of guilt. Terran had been among those who'd voted for the initial strikes, who'd laughed at the idea of humans posing a threat. Now he stood in a room drowning in the consequences. Vera rounded on him, her voice a whip crack. Because we thought them beneath us, Terran. We wanted their labor, their resources, not their extinction. We thought we could leash them, break their spirits. Instead, we lit a fire we can't put out. She gestured to the grid, where another cluster of Zarathian defenses blinked out. Look at them. Do they seem broken to you? Before Terran could retort, a low rumble shook the war room, the walls groaning as dust rained from the ceiling. The grid flared with static, then refocused on a live feed from the eastern front. A human figure stood atop a shattered barricade, silhouetted against the flames. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his armor dented and smeared with violet blood. In one hand, he held a jagged blade. In the other, a tattered flag bearing a blue and green sphere. Earth. Behind him, more humans emerged from the smoke, their voices rising in a chant that carried even through the feed. For Earth! For the fallen! Silith, who'd followed the elders from the chamber, stood at the edge of the room, her breath catching as she watched. She'd trained her whole life to serve the Dominion, to uphold its order, its perfection. But this was chaos incarnate, a force that didn't bend to reason or mercy. She whispered almost to herself, "They're not fighting for victory. They're fighting for something else, something we don't have." Corin glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "They fight for memory," he said, "for every soul we took from them. That's why they won't stop. That's why they can't." The feed shifted again, showing a closer view of the human leader. His face was scarred, one eye hidden beneath a crude patch, but his gaze burned with an intensity that made even Vera falter. He raised the flag higher, shouting words the Zarathians couldn't translate, and his soldiers roared in response, surging forward into the next line of defenses. Plasma bolts lit the air, drones swooped down, but the humans didn't falter. They climbed over their own dead, using the bodies as shields, their advance unbroken. A soldier burst into the war room, his armor scorched, his voice hoarse. "They've reached the mid-tier! The reserves are falling! They're cutting through us too fast! We can't hold them!" He collapsed, gasping, and the counselors erupted into shouts, some calling for evacuation, others for a final stand. Corin raised a hand, silencing them once more. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of inevitability. "Send the signal. Activate the core defenses. If they want Zarathus, they'll bleed for it. Every step, every breath, they'll pay." Vera stared at him, her anger giving way to something colder. "And us? What do we pay, Corin? For starting this?" He didn't answer. The grid pulsed red as the humans drew closer, their chant echoing through the feed, a promise and a curse woven into every word. The elders had warned them, no one had listened, and now the reckoning was here. The core defenses roared to life, a deep thrumming that shook the foundations of Zarathus. Beneath the high spire, ancient mechanisms, forged in an era when the Dominion still fought its wars with blood and steel, awoke from their slumber. Massive turrets rose from the earth, their barrels glowing with the violet fire of plasma coils. Shield walls snapped into place, shimmering barriers that split the mid-tier districts into a labyrinth of death. For a moment, the war room held its breath, the tactical grid showing a flicker of hope as the human advance slowed against the onslaught. Corin watched the grid, his skeletal hands clasped behind his back. The red dots marking the humans pulsed erratically. Some winked out, consumed by the turret's barrages, but others pressed forward, weaving through the chaos with a tenacity that bordered on madness. He could hear their distant shouts through the feed, muffled but unrelenting. For Earth, for the fallen. Each word was a hammer against the Zarathians' fragile morale, a reminder of the sins that had brought this storm to their doorstep. Vera stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the flickering shield readings. "It's working," she muttered, almost disbelieving. "The core lines are holding. They're dying out there. Maybe we can push them back." Her voice trembled with a desperate edge, clinging to the possibility of survival. She'd seen too many battles lost, too many comrades fall to fully trust the moment. But the grid didn't lie, not yet. Silith lingered near the soldier who'd collapsed, tending to his wounds with shaking hands. His breaths were shallow, his armor cracked open like an eggshell, but he grabbed her wrist, his voice a rasp. "You don't get it. They're not dying, not enough. I saw them, crawling, bleeding, still fighting. One of them took a plasma bolt to the chest and kept coming, kept swinging till I cut him down myself." He coughed, violet blood flecking his lips. "They're not like us. They don't stop." Her glowing eyes widened, the soldier's words sinking into her like a blade. She glanced at the grid, where the human dots were indeed thinning, but not vanishing. They shifted, adapted, splitting into smaller groups that darted through gaps in the shield walls, exploiting every weakness with a speed that defied their losses. She whispered, "How do they do it? How do they keep going?" Corin heard her, though he didn't turn. "Because they believe," he said, his tone heavy with something like awe. "We fight for order, for legacy. They fight for something rawer, something we stamped out of ourselves long ago. Faith, rage, love. It's all the same to them now, fused into a fire we can't quench." A sudden crack split the air, the war room trembling as the grid flared with warnings. One of the shield walls had fallen, blown apart by a human explosive, its wreckage raining down on the defenders below. The feed snapped to the breach, revealing a scene that silenced even Vera's fragile hope. A human woman, her armor scorched and one arm hanging limp, stood amid the rubble, a detonator clutched in her remaining hand. Behind her, her squad poured through the gap, their weapons blazing as they carved a path deeper into the city. She staggered, blood streaming from a gash across her face, but her lips moved in a silent chant, for Earth, for the fallen, before she collapsed, her sacrifice complete. Terran stumbled back from the grid, his voice a broken cry. "They're insane! They throw themselves at us like it's nothing. What are we supposed to do against that?" His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a terror that mirrored the soldier's haunted stare. The counselors murmured among themselves, some clutching their robes, others staring blankly at the feed as the humans surged closer. Vera's hands balled into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "We kill them," she snarled. "Every last one. If they want to die for their dirtball planet, we'll give them what they want." But her words rang hollow, undercut by the tremor in her voice. She knew, they all knew, that the humans weren't just dying. They were winning. The grid pulsed again, showing the unbroken descending through the atmosphere, its jagged hull cutting through the smoke like a predator's claw. It didn't fire, didn't engage, just hovered, a silent promise of what was to come. The sight broke something in the room. A counselor sobbed, another fled toward the door, only to be dragged back by Silith, who shouted, "We can't run, not now." Corin finally turned from the grid, his eyes meeting hers. "No," he agreed, his voice steady but laced with sorrow. "We can't run, but we can't win either, not like this." He gestured to the soldier, then to the feed. "They've already paid more than we ever could, and they're still coming." The turrets fired again, their violet light painting the sky, but the human dots kept moving. Fewer now, but no less determined. The unbroken loomed larger, its shadow falling over the high spire. The war room fell silent, save for the soldiers' ragged breaths and the distant, unstoppable chant. The elders had warned them. No one had listened. And now the humans were at their throats. The shadow of the unbroken stretched across the high spire, a dark stain that swallowed the violet glow of the crystal towers. From the war room, the elders could feel its presence, a weight pressing down on their chests, as if the ship itself were a living thing, hungry and inevitable. The tactical grid flickered, its lights dimming as power faltered across the city. The core defenses still blazed, tearing into the human ranks below, but the red dots kept creeping forward, relentless as a rising tide. The turrets' roars were drowned out by the chant echoing through the streets. For Earth, for the fallen. It wasn't just a battle cry anymore. It was a heartbeat, pulsing through the bones of Zarathus. Corin stood at the grid, his composure cracking at last. His hands trembled as he traced the human's path, now less than a kilometer from the spire's base. "They're too close," he murmured, almost to himself. "The reserves are gone. The mid-tier is lost. How do they still have so many?" His voice carried a quiet disbelief, as if the numbers defied not just strategy but reality itself. He'd seen wars before, centuries of them, but nothing like this. Nothing that gnawed at the soul as much as the body. Vera slammed her fist against the console, the impact jarring the grid's display. "Because they don't care," she shouted, her voice raw with exhaustion and fury. "They don't count their dead. They don't mourn. They just keep coming. We've killed thousands, Corin, thousands, and it's not enough." She gestured to the feed, where human soldiers clambered over the wreckage of a fallen turret, their armor riddled with holes, their faces smeared with blood and ash. One of them, a young man with wild eyes, dragged a wounded comrade forward, firing with one hand while the other gripped his brother in arms. They didn't stop. They didn't falter. Silith knelt beside the wounded soldier, her hands stained with his violet blood as she tried to staunch his wounds. He was fading, his breaths shallow, but his eyes locked onto hers with a desperate clarity. "I saw their leader," he rasped. "The one with the flag. Scarred face, one eye. He walked through the fire. Didn't flinch. They follow him like he's more than human, like he's their soul." He coughed, choking on the words, then went still. Silith stared at him, her hands frozen, the weight of his final breath sinking into her. The feed crackled, shifting to a new angle. The base of the spire, where the scarred human leader stood amidst the chaos. His flag was planted in the ground, its tattered edges snapping in the wind as plasma bolts streaked past. He barked orders, his voice a gravelly roar that cut through the din, and his soldiers obeyed without hesitation. They formed a ragged line, shielding him as they advanced, their bodies falling one by one to protect their commander. He didn't waver, didn't glance at the dead, just kept moving, his single eye fixed on the spire like it was the only thing left in the universe. Terran, the young counselor, sank into a chair, his hands clawing at his face. "We're done," he whispered. "They'll tear us apart, piece by piece, and there's nothing we can do. We should have listened. We should have—" His voice broke into a sob, and the other counselors turned away, their own resolve fraying. One of them, an older female named Lyrith, muttered a prayer to gods the Dominion had long since abandoned, her words trembling in the air. Vera whirled on Corin, her eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and despair. "We can't just wait here. Activate the spire's failsafe. Detonate the core. If they want Zarathus, let them choke on the ashes." Her suggestion hung like a blade, sharp and final. The failsafe was a last resort, a fusion cascade that would obliterate the capital and everything within 100 kilometers. It was suicide, but it might take the humans with them. Corin's gaze shifted to her, heavy with the burden of centuries. "And what then, Vera? We die, they die, and the rest of their kind come for what's left. You think this ends with us? This is their vengeance, not their victory. More will rise." He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "We lit this fire. We don't get to choose how it burns." Before Vera could argue, the war room shuddered, a deep crack splitting the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down, and the grid went dark for a moment before flickering back to life. The humans were at the spire's gates, battering them with salvaged cannons, their scarred leader at the forefront. He raised his blade, shouting something that rallied his troops into a frenzy, and the gates buckled under the assault. Salith stood, her voice cutting through the panic. "If we can't stop them, we can slow them. Buy time. Get the civilians out. There's still a chance for some of us." Her words were naive, desperate, but they sparked a flicker of purpose in the room. The counselors hesitated, then nodded, grasping at the slim hope she offered. Corin looked at her, then at the feed, where the gates groaned and splintered. "Time," he said softly, "is the one thing they won't give us." The unbroken rumbled overhead, its shadow deepening, and the chant grew louder, closer, a tide that would drown them all. The gates of the high spire gave way with a scream of twisted metal, the sound echoing through the war room like a death knell. The feed flared with static, then stabilized, showing the humans pouring through the breach, wild, unstoppable, their scarred leader at the helm. His flag whipped in the wind, a banner of defiance stained with the blood of both species, and his soldiers followed him with a fervor that bordered on worship. Plasma bolts lit the air, cutting down dozens, but for every human that fell, 2 more surged forward, their chant. "For Earth! For the fallen!" Ringing louder than the gunfire. Corin stood frozen at the grid, its lights now a chaotic smear of red and fading blue. The spire's inner defenses, automated sentries, energy traps, flared to life, tearing into the invaders with merciless precision, bodies piled at the threshold, a grotesque barricade of flesh and steel, but the humans climbed over their own dead, their hands slick with blood as they clawed their way inside. Corin's voice was a whisper, lost in the chaos. "We built this place to withstand armies, fleets, gods, and they're breaking it with their hands." Vera grabbed his arm, her grip bruising. "We're not done yet. The failsafe. Corin, we have to use it. They're inside. There's no time." Her eyes were wild, her earlier defiance replaced by a raw animal panic. She'd fought too long, lost too much to let it end like this, cornered in a tomb of their own making. The counselors murmured their assent, some nodding frantically, others staring blankly at the feed, as if already resigned to the fire. Silith stepped forward, her voice sharp despite the tremor in her hands. No, the civilians, they're still out there, in the tunnels, the shelters. You'd kill them all just to spite the humans? She pointed to the grid, where faint green dots marked the evacuation routes. Thousands of Zarathians fleeing toward the outer districts. We can't abandon them. We can't become what they think we are. Veyra's lip curled, her frustration boiling over. They're already dead, Silith. You think the humans will stop at the spire? They'll hunt us down, every last one, until there's nothing left. This is our only chance. She turned to Corin, pleading now. High Elder, please, end it. Let us take them with us. Corin's gaze lingered on the feed, where the scarred human leader drove his blade into a sentry's core, sparks flying as it collapsed. The man's face was a mask of rage and sorrow, his single eye burning with a fire that seemed to pierce the screen itself. Corin shook his head slowly. No, Veyra. Silith's right. We've shed enough blood, ours and theirs. The failsafe stays cold. His voice hardened, a flicker of the authority he'd wielded for centuries. We fight. Here. Now for as long as we can. A tremor rocked the room, the ceiling cracking wider as the Unbroken fired its first salvo. A low, rumbling blast that shook the spire to its roots. Dust choked the air, and the grid flickered out, leaving only the feed's grainy image of the humans storming the lower halls. Their leader roared something unintelligible, and his troops responded with a surge, smashing through barricades with salvaged weapons and bare fists. The Zarathian guards fell back, their lines crumbling under the onslaught. Terran leapt to his feet, his panic erupting into action. I'm not dying here, he shouted, shoving past the counselors toward a side passage. There's a shuttle bay. We can still get out. Lyrith grabbed his arm, her voice a hiss. Coward! You'll lead them right to the survivors. But Terran tore free and ran, his footsteps fading into the dark. Silith watched him go, then turned to Corin. What now? They're coming. Minutes, maybe less. What do we do? Her words were steady, but her glowing eyes betrayed her fear, her youth stark against the Elder's weathered resolve. Corin drew a breath, then gestured to the soldier's fallen blade, lying near Silith's feet. We arm ourselves. We hold this room. If they want the heart of Zarathus, they'll choke on it. He moved to a wall panel, slamming his palm against it to reveal a cache of weapons. Sleek, ceremonial blades and plasma pistols, relics of a prouder age. The counselors hesitated, then followed, their hands shaking as they armed themselves for a fight they knew they couldn't win. The feed flickered again, showing the scarred leader ascending the spire's central stair, his troops fanning out behind him. Blood dripped from his blade, his armor scorched and dented, but he moved with a purpose that made the air tremble. His chant grew clearer now, carried by the feed's failing audio. For Earth, for the fallen, for every soul you stole. Each word was a wound, a promise, a curse. Veyra clutched a pistol, her voice low. He's their soul, like the soldier said. Cut him down, and maybe they break. But even she didn't believe it, not fully. The humans weren't a machine to be dismantled. They were a storm, and the spire was its eye. The floor shook again, closer now, and the sound of boots echoed through the walls. Corin raised his blade, his voice steady. Stand with me, one last time. The elders formed a ragged line, Silith at their side, and waited as the storm broke through. The war room's doors buckled, a deafening clang reverberating as the humans hammered against them. Corin stood at the forefront, blade in hand, his ancient frame taut with resolve. Beside him, Veyra gripped her pistol, her breath ragged, while Silith clutched a dagger, her glowing eyes wide but unyielding. The counselors flanked them, their ceremonial weapons trembling in unsteady hands. The feed had gone dark, but the sound told the story. Boots, shouts, and the relentless chant. For Earth, for the fallen. The doors burst open, a tide of humans flooding in, their scarred leader at the helm. His one-eyed gaze swept the room, locking onto Corin with a fury that burned through the haze of smoke and dust. His flag dragged behind him, its pole splintered but defiant, and his soldiers fanned out, weapons raised. The Zarathians braced themselves, the air thick with the weight of their end. Vera fired first, her plasma bolt striking a human in the chest. He staggered but didn't fall, lunging forward with a snarl before Sylith's dagger found his throat. The room erupted. Blades clashed, shots rang out, and blood, violet and red, splattered the crystal floor. Corin swung his blade, cutting down a soldier, but another took his place, then another. The humans fought like a swarm, overwhelming through sheer will. The scarred leader charged Corin, his jagged blade meeting the elders with a force that jarred the old man's bones. "You!" the human roared, his voice raw with hate. "You burned our worlds!" Corin parried, stumbling back, his strength fading. "We warned you," he gasped. "You wouldn't listen." The human's eye blazed, and he struck again, driving Corin to his knees. Vera screamed, firing at the leader, but a human tackled her, pinning her down as her shots went wild. Salith fought to reach her, slashing at anything that moved, her cries lost in the chaos. The counselors fell one by one. Lyrith's prayer cut short by a blade, another's skull crushed under a boot. The humans didn't relent, their numbers thinning but their fury unbroken. Corin's blade slipped from his grasp, his vision blurring as the scarred leader loomed over him. "For Earth," the human growled, raising his weapon. Corin met his gaze, a flicker of regret in his ancient eyes. "We made you this," he whispered. The blade fell, and the High Elder crumpled, his blood pooling beneath him. Sylith reached Vera, dragging her free, but the room was a graveyard. Elders dead, humans wounded but standing. The scarred leader planted his flag in the center, his chest heaving, and turned to his troops. "It's ours," he rasped. The chant rose again, weaker now but triumphant. The spire was theirs. The elders had warned them. No one had listened, and now Zarathus belonged to the unstoppable. The war room lay silent, a tomb of shattered crystal and broken bodies. The scarred human leader stood over Corin's corpse, his blade dripping violet blood, his flag staked in the floor like a conqueror's claim. The Unbroken's rumble vibrated through the spire, a distant heartbeat for the humans who'd survived. Their chant had faded, replaced by heavy breaths and the groans of the wounded. Silith and Vera huddled in a corner, the last of the Zarathians, their weapons lost, their hope extinguished. The humans spared them no glance. Victory was theirs, and mercy wasn't part of it. The leader wiped his blade on his tattered sleeve, his one eye scanning the carnage. His soldiers gathered around him, some clutching wounds, others staring at the fallen elders with a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. He knelt beside Corin's body, his voice low, almost reverent. "You thought us weak. You thought we'd break. Look at us now." He rose, turning to his troops. "This is for Earth, for every soul they took." Silith watched, her glowing eyes dim with grief. She clutched Vera's arm, whispering, "Why didn't they finish us?" Vera's face was a mask of ash and blood, her voice hollow. "Because we're nothing to them now. They've won. We're just ghosts." She laughed bitterly, the sound cracking in her throat. "We warned them. No one listened." A human soldier approached the leader, his armor dented, a crude radio in hand. "Sir, the Unbroken reports the outer districts are secure. Survivors are fleeing, scattered. What's the order?" The leader stared at the flag, its blue and green sphere faded but unbroken. "Let 'em run," he said. They'll carry the story. Let the galaxy know what happens when you cross us." The soldier nodded and relayed the command, the words crackling through the static. The humans began to move, salvaging what they could. Weapons, tech, pieces of the spire itself. The leader lingered, his gaze drifting to Sylith and Vera. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over them. Sylith flinched, but Vera met his eye, defiant even in defeat. "You'll never hold this place," she spat. "More will come, others, stronger than us." He crouched, his scarred face inches from hers. "Let him try. We've got nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for." He stood, turning away, and barked an order. His troops filed out, dragging their wounded, leaving the war room a mausoleum of their triumph. Silith helped Vera stand, the spire trembling as the Unbroken ascended. Through the cracked walls they saw human ships dotting the sky, scarred, relentless, unstoppable. The galaxy would hear of this, and it would shudder. The elders had warned them, no one had listened. Now the humans rose from the ashes, a force forged in betrayal and blood, their cry echoing into the void. "For Earth! For the fallen!" The enemy fleet hovered in the darkness of space, their sleek ships forming a blockade around the besieged planet of Varlock. For centuries, the Vashari Dominion had ruled this sector with an iron grip, enslaving weaker species, crushing rebellions, and expanding their empire with ruthless efficiency. They had never feared any foe, until now. Until humanity arrived. The UN's nemesis loomed in the void, a monster of war forged from Earth's unrelenting defiance. It was unlike any ship the Vashari had ever encountered, twice the size of their largest dreadnought, its hull blackened by the scars of 100 battles, and bristling with weapons that could tear apart entire fleets. The name Nemesis was whispered like a death sentence among the alien ranks. From the bridge, Admiral Elias Varian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the view screen. The Vashari fleet was vast, 300 warships against his lone battleship. The odds were, by all logical measures, impossible, except humanity never cared for logic when it came to war. "Admiral," Commander Sarah Holt said, her voice steady. "They're hailing us." Varian exhaled slowly. "Let them speak." The alien's face flickered onto the screen. A reptilian creature draped in ceremonial armor, its golden scales reflecting the dim light. High Warlord Koresh of the Vashari Dominion glared at Varian with undisguised contempt. "Humans," Koresh hissed, "you defy the Dominion, yet you stand alone. Surrender your vessel, and I may grant your species a merciful death." Varian chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't understand, do you?" His voice was almost amused. "We're not here to negotiate." Koresh's slitted eyes narrowed. "Then you have sealed your fate." Varian raised an eyebrow. "No, Warlord, you have." With a slight nod, he gave the command. "Fire." The Nemesis roared to life. The main cannon, an experimental weapon designed to harness the destructive power of a dying star, unleashed a beam of searing white energy. The first Vashari battleship in its path didn't just explode. It disintegrated, torn apart at the atomic level. The rest of the Vashari fleet had mere seconds to react before the Nemesis rained hell upon them. Its railguns fired at impossible velocities, ripping through shields as though they were paper. Swarms of autonomous drone fighters poured from its hangars, weaving between enemy ships, tearing them apart with surgical precision. Koresh's expression shifted from arrogance to horror. "Impossible!" he snarled. "One ship cannot—" "One human warship is all it takes," Varian interrupted coldly. "You should have learned that when we burned your last colony to the ground." The battle was not a battle. It was a massacre. One by one, Vashari warships met their end in blinding explosions. Escape pods were ignored. Mercy was not on the agenda. Humanity had seen what the Dominion did to their prisoners. Entire colonies reduced to labor camps, civilians experimented on, children taken and never seen again. This was not just war. It was vengeance. Varian watched as the enemy fleet crumbled, their command structure dissolving into chaos. The Vashari had always believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy. But they had never encountered humanity at war. And humanity did not forgive. As the last enemy vessel erupted into a fireball, Varian turned his attention to the planet below. Varlock was a fortress world, home to billions of Vashari. It had once been a symbol of their might. Now it was simply a target. "Sir," Holt said, hesitating. "Orders?" Varian's voice was devoid of hesitation. "Glass it." The Nemesis began its final act. Orbital bombardment rained down upon the planet, turning cities into craters, forests into ash, rivers into boiling steam. The screams of the Vashari echoed through intercepted transmissions before silence took their place. A wasteland, just like the countless human colonies the Dominion had destroyed before. Varian turned away from the screen. "Set course for the next Dominion world," he ordered. "This war doesn't end until they beg for extinction." And with that, the Nemesis disappeared into the void, leaving only fire and ruin in its wake. The Nemesis sailed through the black abyss of space, its colossal frame nearly silent as it moved toward its next target. The bridge was eerily calm, despite the destruction they had just wrought upon Varlock. The enemy's screams, their desperate cries for help, had already faded into the background of war. Admiral Varian stood motionless, staring out at the endless void. His reflection in the reinforced glass looked almost alien to him, his once sharp features now hardened by the weight of command. He had long abandoned the idea of peace. Peace was a lie the Dominion had spat at humanity, while putting their boots on Earth's throat. "Sir," Commander Holt's voice cut through the silence. "Our next target is Trion 7. Intelligence suggests it's a major supply hub for the Dominion's core fleets." Varian didn't turn. "What's the estimated population?" Holt hesitated. "Roughly 20 million. The bridge remained silent, tension thickening the air. 20 million Vashari. Soldiers, civilians, workers, children. A hesitation hung in the air, a moment of humanity clawing at the crew's conscience. "Good," Varian finally said. "If we cripple their supply lines, we cripple their war." Holt nodded, but said nothing. She had been with Varian since the first retaliation against the Dominion, had seen the atrocities committed against humanity firsthand. There was no room for doubt, no space for mercy. Mercy was what had let the Dominion expand unchecked. Mercy was what had cost them Earth's outer colonies. A transmission interrupted their thoughts. "Incoming message from the Dominion, sir," one of the officers reported. "High Warlord Koresh survived. He wants to talk." Varian smirked. "Patch him through." The reptilian warlord's face flickered onto the screen. This time there was no arrogance, only barely contained fury and fear. "You will suffer for what you've done, human," Koresh growled, his voice filled with venom. "The Dominion does not fall so easily." Varian leaned forward slightly, his expression cold. "It already has. You just haven't realized it yet." Koresh bared his fangs. "You are monsters!" Varian let out a short laugh, void of humor. "Monsters! You enslaved our people. You burned our worlds. And now when we return the favor, you want to cry foul? No, Warlord. You made this war. We're just finishing it." Koresh's claws curled into fists. "Humanity will not survive this. The Dominion will strike back." "You won't have the chance," Varian said, his voice sharp as a blade. "This is not a war of survival for us. This is extermination. Koresh's face twisted with rage, but Varian didn't give him the satisfaction of another word. He cut the transmission and turned back to his crew. "Prepare the Hellstorm missiles. I want Trion 7 wiped from the maps." No one questioned the order. The Nemesis pressed forward, carrying humanity's wrath across the stars. The Nemesis slipped through the void, silent and unrelenting. Trion 7 loomed ahead, a planet of steel and industry, its surface covered in sprawling shipyards and supply depots that fed the Dominion's war machine. It was no ordinary target. This was a world designed to fuel their empire's endless expansion, a hub of resources that had supported the enslavement of entire species. But today, it would burn. On the bridge, Admiral Varian watched the tactical display. Thousands of Dominion vessels cluttered Trion 7's orbit. Transport ships, refineries, battleships in dry dock. The planet's defensive fleet was nowhere near as large as Varlock's had been. The Dominion hadn't expected a direct assault. A mistake. "Status of the Hellstorm missiles?" Varian asked, his voice calm. "Fully armed and ready," Commander Holt confirmed. "We can wipe out the planet's atmosphere in a single strike." Varian nodded. "Fire." The Nemesis came alive. From its underbelly, massive silos opened, and the Hellstorm payloads were launched. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward Trion 7, each one containing a payload designed not for precision, but for annihilation. Planetary shields flared to life, but it was futile. The missiles didn't aim for cities. They detonated in the upper atmosphere. The sky turned red, then black as firestorms swept across the world. Below, the surface of Trion 7 descended into chaos. Factories crumbled, supply depots exploded, and the massive orbital shipyards broke apart, sending flaming debris crashing down on the cities below. Smoke choked the air, blocking out the sun. The Dominion forces tried to fight back. A swarm of defense ships surged toward the Nemesis, desperate to protect their crumbling world. "Incoming enemy fire," an officer reported. "Deploy the drones. Return fire." The swarm of enemy ships barely made it halfway before the Nemesis responded. Drone fighters surged forth, moving like a plague of mechanical death, cutting through the enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. The ship's railguns and laser batteries opened fire, slicing apart the Dominion's defense forces as if they were nothing more than insects. On the surface, the Dominion's command centers sent out desperate distress calls. Messages flooded into the human battleship, pleading for surrender, for mercy, for anything other than what was coming. Varian ignored them all. "You never showed us mercy," he muttered under his breath. He watched as the planet turned to ash. Trion 7 was no longer a world. It was a graveyard. Silence fell over the bridge, save for the hum of the ship's systems. The battle was over. There was no celebration, no cheers of victory, only the cold realization that this war had no end. Not until the Dominion itself was nothing more than a whisper in history. Varian exhaled. Set course for the next target. The Nemesis disappeared into the void, leaving behind only smoke, ruin, and the dying screams of an empire. The silence on the bridge of the Nemesis was deafening. No one spoke, no one moved. The screen still showed the burning wreckage of Trion 7, the massive industrial world reduced to a wasteland in mere hours. Even from orbit, the scars were visible. Craters where entire cities once stood. Firestorms raging through the ruins. The once thriving supply hub of the Dominion was now nothing more than a drifting corpse. Admiral Elias Varian let out a slow breath. There was no satisfaction in what they had done. No joy, only necessity. "They're calling us monsters," Commander Holt said quietly, reading intercepted Dominion transmissions. "Their military channels are in chaos. Some are calling for all-out retaliation. Others..." She hesitated. Others are already speaking of surrender. Varian scoffed. Surrender? After what they did to us? Number, they don't get that option. His eyes were cold, distant. Not yet. The Dominion had enslaved human colonies for decades. When Earth had finally fought back, it wasn't out of ambition. It was out of survival. The war had started with hope. It had turned into vengeance. Set course for Jaraxxus Prime, Varian ordered. A murmur ran through the crew. Jaraxxus Prime wasn't just another Dominion world. It was one of their core planets, a cultural and political heart of their empire. A direct assault would send a message across the galaxy. Nowhere was safe. Sir, Lieutenant Moreau, the communications officer, spoke up. We're receiving a transmission, but not from the Dominion. Varian frowned. Who is it? It's from the Talani Confederacy. They're offering a ceasefire, mediation between us and the Dominion. The Talani were neutral in this war. They had watched from the sidelines as the bloodshed unfolded, unwilling to take a side. But now they were intervening. Now, after humanity had proven what it was capable of. Put them through. The screen flickered, and a Talani diplomat appeared. A tall, avian-like creature with silver feathers and piercing golden eyes. Admiral Varian, the Talani envoy began, his voice smooth, calculated. We have watched this conflict unfold, and we urge you to reconsider your actions. The Dominion has suffered enough. Varian raised an eyebrow. Enough? His voice was laced with quiet anger. Were you there when the Dominion burned our colonies? When they slaughtered our people like cattle? Where was your intervention then? The Talani envoy didn't flinch. We understand your anger, Admiral, but this war has reached a turning point. If you continue, it will not be war. It will be extermination. Varian leaned forward, his gaze cold and unwavering. That's the idea. A long silence. The Talani envoy studied him, as if searching for something. Some hint of hesitation, some remnant of humanity's old self before the war had changed them. But there was none. Admiral, the envoy finally said, the galaxy is watching. If you destroy the Dominion completely, humanity will not be seen as liberators. You will be seen as conquerors, and one day someone will rise to do to you what you are doing to them. Varian smirked, but there was no humor in it. Let them try. The screen cut to black. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent. No one questioned the Admiral's decision. No one argued. They had all lost too much to care about diplomacy now. Holt shifted uncomfortably. Do you think the other empires will intervene? Varian sighed. They won't move unless we make them, and by the time they decide, it will already be too late. The Nemesis jumped to FTL, streaking through the stars like a shadow of death. Jaraxxus Prime awaited. The Nemesis emerged from FTL like a phantom of destruction, slipping into the orbit of Jaraxxus Prime, one of the Dominion's core worlds. This wasn't some distant colony or a supply hub. It was a beating heart of the Dominion Empire, a world teeming with billions of their kind. It was their pride, their history, their culture. And soon, it would burn. Admiral Varian stood at the command console, watching the massive planet fill the bridge's viewport. Jaraxxus Prime was beautiful in its own way, covered in sprawling cities with towering spires of obsidian and gold. Their structures were sleek, their technology advanced, but beneath all the grandeur, it was still the home of slavers and tyrants. Commander Holt exhaled sharply. They're hailing us, sir. High Chancellor Ithakis himself. The Dominion's leader. Varian nodded. Put him through. The screen flickered to life, revealing Rathakis, a towering reptilian figure with dark emerald scales and piercing yellow eyes. Unlike Warlord Koresh, who had snarled and spat threats, Rathakis sat calmly in his ornate throne, watching Varian with a calculated expression. Admiral Varian, Rethicus said smoothly. You stand at the gates of my world. What will you do? Varian's face was emotionless. What I have done to every world before this. Rethicus nodded, as if he had expected that answer. We underestimated you. We saw humanity as a lesser species, weak, divided. But now I see something else. I see a force that even the Dominion cannot contain. Varian tilted his head slightly. If you're about to beg, don't waste my time. The Dominion leader's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. Beg? Number, but I will offer you something no human leader has ever had before. Dominion surrender. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Even Holt's usual icy demeanor cracked for a moment. Varian's eyes narrowed. Explain. Rethicus leaned forward. Withdraw your forces. Stop your war. In return, we will recognize humanity as an equal power. The Dominion will cease all hostilities, return all human prisoners, and sign a non-aggression pact that will last for generations. Silence. It was everything humanity had fought for, everything the war had been about. The nightmare could finally end, with Earth victorious, with humanity free. Varian exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. And what about justice? Rethicus blinked. Justice? For the billions you enslaved, the colonies you burned, the families you ripped apart, Varian said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. You expect us to just shake hands and move on? The Dominion leader hesitated for a moment, then spread his clawed hands. We cannot change the past, Admiral. But we can shape the future. If you destroy us now, you do not just kill an empire, you create a vacuum, and something worse will rise to fill it. You think yourself the harbinger of justice, but tell me, when does justice become vengeance? Varian stared at him, unblinking. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Something almost human. Then it was gone. We passed the line between justice and vengeance a long time ago, Varian said quietly. Holt stiffened. Sir, are you saying, fire the Hellstorm missiles? A final silence. The death of diplomacy. Admiral, Rethicus said, his voice quieter now. Do not do this. Varian held his gaze. Goodbye, Chancellor. The screen cut off. The missiles launched. Jaraxxus Prime's sky turned to fire. The planet's defense grid erupted in a desperate attempt to intercept the incoming devastation. But it was useless. The Nemesis had planned for this. Humanity had perfected planetary extermination. Explosions rippled across the world. Towers collapsed. Entire cities were swallowed by firestorms. Billions screamed, and then the screams faded into static. The Nemesis did not wait to watch the final moments. As the planet burned behind them, Varian turned away. Set course for the Dominion home world. It was almost over. The Nemesis tore through the void, a specter of death on its final approach. The Dominion homeworld, Corthion Prime, lay ahead. A planet that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, an empire's heart now awaiting the fate of those before it. The end had come. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, his expression carved from stone. The fiery wreckage of Jaraxxus Prime still burned in his mind, but there was no regret, no hesitation. The war had started long ago, with Dominion warships glassing human colonies, reducing entire civilizations to slaves. Now, humanity was merely repaying the debt in full. Enemy fleet detected, Commander Holt reported. Their last line of defense, estimated 3,000 ships, all converging on our position. Varian exhaled. All that's left of their once mighty armada. Corthion Prime had thrown everything into this final stand. Battleships, cruisers, swarms of fighters. The Dominion had ruled through force and fear for centuries. But now, faced with extinction, They had no choice but to fight to the last. "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Moreau said. "Let me guess," Varian muttered. "More pleas for mercy?" "No, sir," Moreau said, voice grim. "They say they will fight to the last warrior. No surrender." A smirk played at the corner of Varian's lips. For once, they understand us. A moment of silence settled over the bridge. There was no need for grand speeches, no need for theatrics. Everyone aboard the Nemesis knew what they were about to do. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Engage. The void ignited. The Nemesis moved like a predator, its weapons ripping through the Dominion fleet with precision and brutality. Drone swarms danced through the battlefield, cutting apart enemy fighters like insects trapped in a storm. Railguns thundered, spewing tungsten slugs at near-light speeds, shattering hulls like paper. Dominion ships fought back with everything they had. Plasma beams lanced through the darkness. Missile barrages rained toward the Nemesis. But it was hopeless. Humanity's warship was a fortress of destruction, its defenses unbreakable, its firepower unmatched. Varian watched as the enemy fleet crumbled. One by one, their battleships fell. Command ships detonated in blinding flashes, their crews silenced in an instant. Some Dominion vessels, seeing the inevitability of defeat, tried to flee. The Nemesis did not allow it. "No survivors," Varian ordered. Torpedoes chased down the stragglers, turning their ships into floating wreckage. The Dominion had once terrorized the stars. Now their greatest fleet was nothing more than debris, and Corthion Prime lay defenseless. "Prepare the Hellstorm missiles," Varian commanded. Holt hesitated. "Sir, there are billions down there, civilians." Varian's jaw tightened. "Did they spare ours?" Holt said nothing. She knew the answer. The missiles launched. Corthion Prime's atmosphere turned to fire. The planet's great cities, monuments to an empire that had enslaved species across the stars, collapsed beneath waves of destruction. Plasma storms erupted, oceans boiled, the land itself cracked under the weight of devastation. Humanity had not just won the war, they had erased the Dominion from existence. Varian turned away from the screen. "It's done," he said quietly. Silence filled the bridge. The war that had defined their generation, that had burned through entire civilizations, was over. For the first time in history, humanity stood alone as the dominant force in the galaxy. Varian let out a slow breath. There was no victory song, no celebration. Just the quiet hum of the Nemesis as it disappeared into the stars, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. The void of space stretched endlessly before them, vast and indifferent. The Nemesis drifted in silence, its weapons cooling, its mission complete. Corthion Prime, once the heart of the Dominion, was now a graveyard, a smoldering ruin where billions had drawn their final breath. No cries remained, no fleets, no desperate last stands. Humanity had finished what it started. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, staring at the dead world below. He had imagined this moment for years. He had envisioned vengeance, the thrill of triumph, the satisfaction of knowing humanity had avenged its dead. But now, looking at the barren wasteland they had created, there was only emptiness. Holt approached him cautiously. "Sir, we've intercepted transmissions across the galaxy. The other empires, they've seen what we've done." Varian didn't turn to her. "And?" She hesitated. "Fear. Some are calling for an alliance against us. Others are silent, watching, waiting." Varian closed his eyes briefly. Of course, this was inevitable. Humanity had not just destroyed an enemy, they had reshaped the balance of power. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, some stronger, some weaker, all now forced to reevaluate their place. They fear us, Holt continued, lowering her voice. They see what we're capable of. Varian exhaled. Good. Silence lingered between them, thick and heavy. What now? Holt finally asked. We've won. There's no one left to fight. Varian turned away from the viewport, his expression unreadable. There will always be someone left to fight. Across the galaxy, distant empires whispered in fear. Governments held secret meetings, debating whether humanity was now the greatest threat to existence itself. Some would submit, others would prepare for war. It didn't matter. Humanity had risen, and it would never bow again. The Nemesis cut through the darkness of space, moving like a silent wraith. The war was over. The Dominion, the great empire that had once ruled the galaxy, was now nothing but dust and ruin. And yet, the galaxy did not celebrate. It trembled. Varian stood at the command console, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of known star systems. One by one, reports trickled in from human intelligence networks, alien fleets mobilizing, fortifications being reinforced, uneasy truces between long-standing enemies forming. The message was clear. The galaxy was terrified. Humanity was no longer a minor species fighting for survival. It was now the dominant force, the apex predator among the stars. And the rest of the galaxy was trying to decide whether to submit or strike first. Commander Holt approached, her expression tight. We're receiving diplomatic messages from multiple species. Some are congratulating us. Some are less diplomatic. Varian smirked. Let me guess, they call us monsters? Holt nodded. Some are calling us the Butchers of Korthion. Others are demanding answers. They want to know if we intend to conquer them next. Varian let out a slow breath, his fingers tapping against the console. And what do you think, Commander? Holt hesitated. I think they're scared, sir. I think they believe we'll do to them what we did to the Dominion. Varian turned his gaze towards the viewport, watching the endless stretch of space. He had spent his entire career fighting a war for survival, for vengeance. Now that the war was over, he wasn't sure what was left. We send a message back, he said finally. Holt straightened. What do we tell them? Varian's expression was cold, unreadable. We tell them the truth. Humanity will not start wars, but if they raise a hand against us, we will finish them. Holt gave a slow nod. Understood. She turned to relay the message, but before she could take a step, another alert flashed on the screen. Sir, Moreau called out from the comms station. We're detecting a large-scale energy surge in deep space. Unknown origin. Varian frowned. Explain. Moreau's hands moved swiftly across the controls, analyzing the data. It's not a fleet, not a weapon. It's something different. A gravitational anomaly forming outside of mapped star systems. Whatever it is, it's big. Varian's brow furrowed. How big? Moreau hesitated. Large enough to destabilize space-time in the surrounding systems. This isn't just some anomaly. It's a rupture. The bridge went silent. Varian exchanged a glance with Holt. They had fought the Dominion, crushed their empire, and now, just as the war had ended, something new was emerging. Location? Varian asked. Far beyond any explored territory, Moreau answered. Deep space, past the galactic rim. Varian nodded slowly. Then we investigate. Prepare the fleet. Holt stiffened. Sir, we just ended one war. Are we really about to rush headfirst into another unknown? Varian turned to her, his expression calm but resolute. We didn't survive the Dominion just to cower in the dark. Whatever's out there, we'll face it. The Nemesis adjusted course, its engines roaring to life. Humanity had won the war. Now it was time to see what lay beyond. The Nemesis moved through the void, its engines humming softly as it ventured into uncharted space. Behind it, a fleet of humanity's finest warships followed in tight formation, silent, prepared, watching. The war with the Dominion was over, but now something new loomed ahead. The anomaly. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, his gaze locked on the holographic display. The readings were unlike anything they had encountered before. A gravitational rift, larger than any known celestial body, pulsed at the edge of the galaxy. Space itself seemed to ripple around it, distorting the fabric of reality. "Status?" Varian asked. Commander Holt, standing beside him, shook her head. "Still no known origin. No signals, no transmissions. Just energy, and a lot of it." Lieutenant Moreau, stationed at the sensor console, leaned forward. "Sir, we're detecting movement within the anomaly." Varian's eyes narrowed. "Define movement." Moreau's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up enhanced visuals. The display flickered, revealing a swirling mass of darkness. Then something shifted. Shadows coalesced into shapes, unnatural and massive. Silhouettes of what could only be ships emerging from the distortion. Everyone on the bridge froze. "Unknown vessels detected," Moreau confirmed, her voice tight. "Size impossible. Some of them are larger than entire cities." The Nemesis had faced behemoth-class Dominion warships before, but this was different. These things were not just large. They were unnatural, shifting between states of solidity and void, as if the laws of physics barely applied to them. A voice crackled over the fleet-wide comms. "This is Captain Darnell of the Vanguard. What the hell are we looking at?" Varian stared at the screen. Something old. Holt swallowed hard. "Sir, they're moving toward us." Varian clenched his jaw. "Comms, try to hail them." Moreau initiated an open-frequency transmission. "This is the United Terran Navy. Identify yourselves." Silence. Then a sound. Not words, not static. A deep, resonant noise like a chorus of voices speaking in layered frequencies. It wasn't a language. It was something deeper, something felt rather than heard. A presence pressing into their minds. The bridge crew stiffened. Moreau shuddered, clutching her head. I can't cut transmission," Varian ordered immediately. The sound stopped, but a lingering unease remained in the air. Holt exhaled sharply. "Sir, what the hell was that?" Varian didn't answer. His instincts screamed that whatever lay beyond that rift was not something humanity had ever encountered before, not even in myths, not in the oldest of alien records. This was beyond the Dominion, beyond war. This was something ancient. "Energy spike!" Moreau yelled. "They're charging weapons!" The bridge exploded into action. Alarms blared as the massive shadow ships surged forward, their forms twisting through space with unnatural speed. "All ships, battle stations," Varian commanded. "Open fire!" The Nemesis unleashed hell. Railguns fired in rapid succession, spewing tungsten slugs at near-light speed. Plasma batteries roared, sending superheated destruction toward the incoming threat. The fleet followed, weapons lighting up the void. For a moment it seemed like humanity would do what it always did. Fight, conquer, survive. Then the shadows struck back. Lances of pure blackness lashed out, consuming light itself. The first wave of human ships was torn apart, their hulls crumbling into nothingness before even registering damage. A Dominion fleet would have been obliterated instantly. But humanity was not the Dominion. "Adaptive shielding," Varian barked. "Redirect energy to defensive arrays." The Nemesis shifted, its barriers reforming in real time, countering the unknown energy signatures. The surviving ships did the same, holding formation, learning. Humanity was adaptable. It always had been. The battle raged in the abyss, fire and darkness clashing. The Nemesis weaved between attacks, countering with overwhelming firepower, but for every enemy vessel destroyed, more emerged from the rift. Holt's face was pale. "Sir, there's no end to them." Varian gritted his teeth. They had destroyed the Dominion. Now they were fighting something even worse. And for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't sure if humanity would survive. The void was a battleground of fire and shadow. Humanity's fleet fought with relentless fury, adapting, countering, surviving. But the enemy was endless. For every shadow ship torn apart by the Nemesis's guns, more emerged from the rift, shifting between dimensions, absorbing damage that should have obliterated them. Admiral Varian gripped the console, his mind racing. He had never faced an enemy like this. Not even the Dominion had possessed such unnatural resilience. Humanity had waged war across the stars. But this was something different. Something beyond war. "Shields at 30%, Holt called out, her voice tight with urgency. "If we don't retreat..." "We can't retreat," Varian cut her off. "If we run, they follow. And if they reach human space, we lose everything." A moment of silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. The reality was sinking in. The fleet couldn't win this battle, not in a conventional sense. Moreau's voice cracked over the chaos. "Sir, the rift. There's a destabilization occurring." Varian turned sharply. "Explain." Moreau's hands moved rapidly across the controls. It's like their presence is tied to the anomaly. It's their entry point. If we overload it... "We cut them off," Varian finished, understanding dawning. Holt's expression darkened. "And how exactly do we do that?" Varian's gaze flickered to the status of the Nemesis. The ship was battered, its shields flickering, its weapons burning hot. But its core was still intact. Humanity's warships were built for devastation, and nothing was more devastating than a controlled annihilation. He exhaled. "We take the Nemesis into the rift." The bridge went silent. Holt turned to him, her expression incredulous. "That's suicide." Varian's lips curled into a grim smile. "Number, that's war." Moreau's voice wavered. "Sir, if we detonate our core at the right frequency, it might be enough to collapse the anomaly. But that would mean this warship completes its mission," Varian finished. "The Nemesis was built to win wars, and that's exactly what it's going to do." Holt's jaw clenched. "We don't even know if this will work. We could be throwing ourselves into oblivion for nothing." Varian turned to the viewport, watching the endless tide of shadow ships advancing. "And if we do nothing, we guarantee oblivion." A heavy silence fell over the crew. Then, slowly, one by one, they nodded. "All hands," Varian commanded, his voice steady. "Prepare for final approach." The fleet received its orders. The Nemesis would charge into the rift, carrying a payload strong enough to collapse it. The surviving human ships would fall back, carrying word of what had happened here. They would remember. As the Nemesis surged forward, the enemy responded. The shadows swarmed, sensing the threat, pouring everything they had into stopping it. But humanity had already won the moment it chose to fight. Turrets fired relentlessly, carving a path through the abyss. Hull plating melted, shields flickered, warning alarms blared. But the ship never slowed. The rift loomed ahead, a pulsing wound in reality. Varian stood at the bridge, his expression calm. He had fought for humanity's survival his entire life. He had turned planets to dust, crushed empires, reshaped the fate of the galaxy, and now he would end the greatest threat it had ever known. "Detonation in 10 seconds, Moreau announced, her voice steady despite the storm around them. Holt met Varian's gaze, something unspoken passing between them. See you on the other side, she said softly. Varian smirked. No, you won't. And then, light. A burst of energy so powerful it tore through space itself. The Nemesis detonated, its core releasing enough force to collapse the rift, sealing the enemy away forever. The surviving human fleet watched as the anomaly imploded, the shadow ships vanishing with it, screaming soundlessly into the void. And then there was silence. Holt, aboard one of the retreating ships, stared at the empty space where the Nemesis had once been. Her fists clenched. Humanity had lost its greatest warship, but it had won. The message was clear, to any species who would threaten them, to any empire that thought humanity was weak. We do not start wars, but we finish them.